And welcome back to another episode of the Kick and Cover podcast. Today we have Anthony Trotta, the special teams coordinator and tight end coach at Carroll University, just outside of Cleveland, Ohio. Coach, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, Coach Bandstra. Thanks for having me on. I look forward to talking some football.
Oh, I appreciate you, Coach. Coach has done a video before us on punt block return before. Back, God, what was that? April, May, somewhere in there.
Yeah, seems like forever ago.
In COVID time, it is forever, Coach. It's just, and we got talking before you came on, just the kind of monotony of sitting by ourselves in either my classroom or an office with there's nobody on campus. We're digital through January 1st. It's not fun. Social interaction is needed.
Yeah, the best part about coaching is being around your players and being able to interact with them. I firmly believe that your players are what it's all about. So not being able to have them around and be with them on a daily basis has been tough. I know a lot of us who got in the coaching profession didn't sign up to sit in an office from 9 to 5 and, just be able to watch tape. We want to, be out there coaching and interacting with our guys. So it's definitely been an interesting off season, but, looking forward to the future, and very fortunate that at John Carroll we have a great group of kids that have been keeping themselves busy throughout this and, constantly asking for more throughout this whole time. So, looking forward to the spring and, hopefully getting to play some football.
Oh yeah, and as I said before you came on, I'm actually really looking forward to some of the spring ball in the spring here in Ohio, because like I said, I want to be able to either at least go see one of your games in person, God willing, or at least stop by a practice or something, because I know you got your first game. I think you said like March 12th or something like that. Like I said, that'll be exciting. The only difference is I'll have to bundle up because Cleveland in March is, well, not the warmest place in the country. So
that's for sure. And I'd be willing to trade off an extra layer of clothes just to be out there and coaching some football. And I think once that ball hits the ground and it starts going, the adrenaline and juice, it'll be nice and warm. It'll be a warm event, but definitely looking forward to those Friday nights in the spring. Kicking off that spring season March 12th.
Oh yeah, no, I agree 100%. My DC said something on one of our other podcasts about that. He's like, I'd wear a hazmat suit if I had to. Hey, if you got to wear a couple extra layers, you got to wear a couple extra layers. You got to do what you got to do. It could always be worse. It could be always worse. So before we get started, for people who don't know who you are, do you want to kind of give me a background how you ended up at John Carroll?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is my going on my 9th month at John Carroll. I was back at the end of February, beginning of March. Was hired there as the special teams coordinator and the tight ends. My background in special teams came a lot from my role in college. I was a primary special teams player, subbed in defensively, but my role was special teams. And that's where my love for special teams really developed, is, understanding the game through a different lens. I haven't, in high school, I played a small high school football, played offense, defense, special teams, but I never really truly understood it until the college level. And that was my primary role. So really looking forward to kind of expanding that, and then obviously getting into the coaching career. I was a high school defensive coordinator, and I oversaw the special teams for our district. So it was, my role was supposed to originally be just special teams coordinator, and before the season I was promoted to defensive coordinator. It was definitely something that I really enjoyed doing, and I never really wanted to give up that grasp of having a touch on special teams, just because I think it's such an important part of the game. So to be able to come to John Carroll with all the history and tradition here and be the special teams coordinator was kind of a no-brainer. The tight end stuff, that's switching mentalities for me. I'm a defensive guy. Like I said, coach defense, every position on defense, been a defensive coordinator at the high school level, coached the defensive line at a previous institution. And, so switching over to tight ends has definitely been interesting, but again, it's helping me develop and see the game through a different lens. But I love special teams because I'm not just interacting with one position group with one room. I'm interacting with everybody on the football team. And for me, like I said, I think the players are the most important of every football team. So being able to have that interaction and getting to know every single one of those guys and having the opportunity to really influence the game and a special teams mentality is something I'm really excited about here at John Carroll. And like I said, hopefully we get to roll our special teams unit out there in the spring.
Well, I agree 100%, Coach, and that's a conversation I've had with several people. It is part of the reason why a strange special teams coaches, because we're kind of the black sheep of the coaching staff. Like everybody else has their RPOs and their cover fours, but we're over here watching kick videos, and but all of us kind of agree on the same thing. Part of the reason why we love being special teams coordinators is we have to work with the entire roster. We're not limited to a small position group. We're not limited to just half the roster. I mean, we get everybody, because theoretically everybody could probably play about everything, or we'll be on at least one unit. Like linemen are going to be probably on field goal PAT. Your skilled kids are going to be virtually every single other one of them. So it's a very interesting position to have on a staff, the ability to work with everybody, whereas not everybody gets that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. You made me laugh when you talked about the special teams guys kind of go do their own thing. One thing I heard is nobody knows who the special teams coordinator is until a kick gets blocked or you give up a fake. And and I always chuckle at that statement, and it's the truth. If you're, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, nobody should really know who you are as a special teams coordinator. You're just going out and doing your job. So that's it made me chuckle when you said we go do our own things as special teams guys, but it's really having the ability to work with everybody. Mm-hmm. Like you said, my philosophy is starters play special teams. It doesn't matter who you are on the roster. You have the opportunity to get out there on special teams because we can win and lose football games in that facet. So we want to get those guys out there and have them playing on special teams and being able to influence the game on special teams. So it's definitely a fun, I would say, ability to be able to work with everybody. Sometimes you're fighting and arguing with the offensive and defensive coordinator and the head coach on how many reps a guy can get on special teams, but it's always good to be able to, have a head coach that supports special teams like Coach Venati at John Carroll and really, really believes in that starters play on special teams mentality. So, you have the pick of the litter from the roster.
No, that's fantastic, Coach. And so let's kind of move into punt block return. What is your philosophy with that phase of balls? Because some people are very block oriented. Because I remember seeing Cincinnati special teams coordinator in the spring at our state clinic. He talked about that. Others are trying to set up a return and variety. Some people have 5 different layers to it where they try to be the Swiss Army knife of punt block. It kind of just depends on the person. So what's your philosophy with punt block return?
So I think to answer that question, I have to really first take a step back and tell you my philosophy on special teams in general is the simpler the better, in the sense of I don't want to be very complex with what we're doing schematically to where our guys get slowed down. I want to be very simple schematically and add tweaks here, but I want to be really complex and really fundamental. That's where we're going to hammer it home, is in those fundamentals. I want to be really, really technically sound on special teams, because if we're technically sound, that's when we can start developing those more complex systems. But until we are, we can't be anything more than what we want to be. So you have to take it, that step first. And with that mindset is our pump block is called pump block return, right? So our block scheme is going to set up a return for us. So even if we want to return the football here, we're still going to call one of our layered blocks. So the mentality is everybody on the unit is a block man. So everybody up front on that first line is part of the block until they're not. Until the call tells them they're not part of the block unit. So, looking at it from that standpoint is having that mentality. You have to teach the mentality of the unit first, in my opinion, where those guys understand what you're trying to do. They understand the why of the unit. And then, like I said, we're developing those skills, those basic fundamentals, and really developing them because we want to be efficient with our time, especially in this phase where we can change the momentum of a football game by blocking a kick. So obviously, why would we want to be passive? We want to be an aggressive mentality. We want to have the mentality that we're going to block this until you're not part of the block call.
Okay. No, that makes sense, Coach. And so how do you go and start teaching that in your room? Or like, obviously I'm not asking for your entire playbook by any means, but how do you go through the process of teaching your kids your system in the classroom and on the field? What does that progression look like?
For me, that progression is we have a big three for every phase. And you might remember this from the last time we talked, but I think that's the biggest thing with, I take that from my background of being a high school learning support teachers, having those three big ideas for the day and kind of accomplishing them. So that I take that and I develop that with my special teams of, okay, well, what are the big three, the most important three things for this unit? So we have in the big three, you're going to have attack, you're going to have engage, and you're going to have finish. So everything we do is going to be part of one of those phases on pump block return. So you start with attack. Okay, well, we're going to install the attack phase. How do we approach it in the attack phase? Well, it starts with stance. Okay, we're in a 2-point stance with our foot closest to the football back. This is what we should look like. And you start there. The building blocks of everything start with that. But it all falls under that umbrella of attack. Right? So you're teaching that pillar. Then you're moving on to the engage. Okay, well, these are the techniques I really need to be successful at in the engage, whether it's engage, dip and rip and block the kick, or it's engage where I'm running down the field and I'm, hip and rattle. I'm being a pester to that guy as I'm running down the field. What does the techniques look like in that specific phase? And then the finish phase. How do I finish? How do I finish if I'm blocking the guy at the return or if I'm blocking the kick? So I think if you break it down into those three main phases, I think that's really crucial, because then you get to start talking to the guys. Okay, hey, we weren't successful on this rep because of our engage phase. And then, okay, now I take that and I say, okay, we lost that rep based on engage. Well, now you go back into practice, and what are you drilling at practice? Well, you're drilling that phase of the unit. So that for me is my base philosophy on how we want to set it up day one, what we want to teach. So we're going to teach those three base phases and then get into, the nuts and bolts of what we're doing in each phase from there.
Now, I kind of want to go back to something you said there, is you brought up the 2-point stance there. And you do a 2-point stance, whereas I'd say probably a majority of colleges, or actually probably colleges and high schools, do that 3-point. It's not even really a 3-point; it's like a 3-point track stance almost.
Yeah.
Why that instead? Because after your video, we switched to the 2-point this year.
Yes.
For our season, I had an argument with one of our older coaches about it, and so why the 2-point over the 3-point, Coach?
For me, look at the guys on the punt return. You have linebackers, you have defensive backs, you have wide receivers. Potentially, you have guys that don't get in a 3-point stance any other time on the football field. Any other time throughout the game, they're not in a 3-point stance. So why am I going to tell them, just because it's been done like that forever, get down in the 3-point sprinter stance and that's how you're going to be the fastest? No, I'm going to let these guys play how they play. I want them to be comfortable. And I believe if they're comfortable and they get lined up and they know their assignment, and I'm going to teach them, how to be really successful fundamentally with their techniques, then we're going to be really successful on the unit. But it all boils down to who are the guys on the field. If they're a bunch of DBs and linebackers who never play in a 3-point stance, I'm not going to ask them to play in a 3-point stance for that one snap. I don't believe in that. I think that's counterproductive to what you want to do. You spend more time talking to this kid about his stance and how crappy it is than coaching up something on the unit, right?
Yeah.
It's the truth. It's like you're going to waste more time that you don't have coaching up on how to get in a proper 3-point stance than coaching the technique that he can use to block the kick or to help spring a return. I don't believe in that. I want our guys to be fast. I want them to be flexible. I want them to be comfortable. I want us to be able to go out and, if you run a 4.7, I want you to go out and play at a 4.7 speed. I don't want you to have to worry about getting in a 3-point stance and, oh, I'm not in the right stance. And now you're at 4.7 running a 5.0. Well, what does that really do for me out there? It doesn't really do anything for me. So I want you to be out there, and I want those guys to be in a comfortable position that they play in the entire game that they're used to their entire life.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I mean, that's kind of why I don't like old pro style punt either. Like, it's not that kind of drop back motion for 8 kids at once is not a natural fluid motion that you're going to do naturally, especially those kids. Because a lot of times you have like those hybrid running back, tight end type kids who aren't going to do standard old pass pro.
Absolutely.
And high school teams don't do pass. Most of us don't do true pass pro anyways. Like, we're all, I mean, hell, high school's slide protection 90% of the time. Mm-hmm. So, like, again, that's a whole nother rant I could go on later. But kind of going from there in terms of the punt block aspect, because I thought about something while you were, I really need to stop hitting my mic. While you were talking is, how do you like, obviously we talk launch point, kick points, as special teams coordinators on where to aim, because you're not running at the punter, you're going to aim where the punter kicks from. But how do you teach the hand part of the block? Because over the past, like, I don't know, was it 7 months I've been doing these podcasts and clinics, I've seen a couple different variations on how people want to do it in terms of cross your hands, one hand, aiming points. So what is your kind of teaching point for the actual portion of the block?
So I think the biggest thing is where your alignment is, okay? If you are aligned, if it's a right-footed kicker and you're aligned on the defensive left, where are you finishing? All right, you're finishing across the block, right? You don't want those guys to end up running into each other. You don't want them. They have to know where they align and where they're allowed to finish. So as a coach, you have to determine based on the scheme where this guy's aligned, where he's allowed to finish. And that's all in your prep throughout the week. And that's when you teach, in my opinion, when you teach the block point or the block spot for this kick, you tell them, okay, well, if you're here, here, and here, you finish on this side of the punter. If you're here, here, and here, you finish on this side of the punter. And then when it comes to teaching the block, it's, you know, my biggest thing is it's got to come out from your belly button. Your hands have to shoot from your belly button. I think that's the biggest thing, is we want to try to keep those hands down. Too many times you're barely missing kicks because your hands are above your head. I want those, if you give them that aiming point of coming from your belly button, they may be a little bit higher, but they may not be, they're not coming from the chin. You know what I mean? It's like that mentality of, okay, well, I'm going to tell you this because I know you're going to take a little bit more than I tell you. So I'm going to coach you up, and I'm really going to be on you about, hey, they come from your belly button, because I know if they come from your belly button, we're going to have a shot to block this thing rather than them coming from above your shoulders.
You sound a lot like my DC there when he was an O-line coach. He would tell them 0 degree steps, and he knew that no teenager's going to step at 0 degrees, but they'll at least try to, so they'll step at 10 or 20 instead of. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, I get your point there.
It's all about knowing your guys, and I think, like I said, the general point that I've always used is coming from your belly button, and just giving the guys like that something simple to remember it with. But you know, I think the biggest thing is looking at what your opponent does as far as their scheme and determining who finishes on what side of the kicker is huge. And that's how you avoid penalties, in my opinion, is determining which guys part of the block can finish on which side of the kicker. Are you running by on one side, and are you crossing his face on the other side?
Yeah, no, I agree. And like I said, it's good little teaching points that, again, as we dive into this, like, it's like, what fits you and your program the best? And that kind of moves me into my next question is, not everybody has a lot of times or are given a lot of time by their head coaches for drills or for the special teams portion. You know, as I do, some programs just don't put a big emphasis on it for a variety of reasons, and some do a really good job at putting an emphasis on it. So if you had to pick like 1 or 2 drills to work for punt block return, okay, outside of a whole team aspect, and you showed some of them off during your clinic presentation for me, which will be also linked in the bio. People will watch the full version of that so they can kind of see it. But out of those drills, like, what 1 or 2 would you pick to use?
Oh man, you're giving me a tough one with it. Just coming up with one or two. It's finding different ways to drill stuff is part of the fun of special teams, is different ways to drill different things and get the different skills accomplished. But the first one would obviously have to be the attack phase. Because if you don't win the attack phase, you're either going to be you're never going to get there to block it, number one, and number two, you're never going to be successful trying to block. If you're losing at the line of scrimmage, for those guys that are part of the return side of it, you're never gonna be able to spring a guy unless you have a dude at returner, because you're losing at the line of scrimmage. Right? This unit is won and lost at the line of scrimmage, whether you're blocking the kick or whether you're returning the kick. Right. So we need to drill. That would be the first and foremost. And then probably if I had to pick a second one, it would be the engage phase. I just thinking back to my total philosophy, it has to be those first two. If I'm only getting two, it's got to be, we want to win in that attack and we want to win in the engage. If we can win in attack and win in engage, then somebody has the ability on the unit to make a special play. Somebody has the ability to reach an arm out and block this thing if we're really good at those first two, or somebody has the ability to give the returner just enough of a lane to scoot through and make a play for us and get some field position. So if I was limited to two, I'm going to go with one of our drills that we do come in, just a get off drill, where we're getting off and we're attacking. We're fitting up on a guy and we're working that attack phase. Taking all the ground that belongs to you really on that first phase, and really getting into some people and having that aggressive mentality. And then, like I said, the engage phase, one of the drills where we're working either, the hip and rattle phase, where if he's even, you're long arm and you're sitting and fitting and all that stuff. So it's, yeah, that's a tough question. It's a tough question, but you hit the nail on the head. Special teams is usually that unit that, you lose most often. Offense and defense has to take priority, which is expected. So I think it's always a battle as a special teams coordinator, to advocate for the time that you need to be successful with that unit. But like I said, it's very fortunate here. Coach Donati is a special teams guy. He really believes in, having the time and being successful on the team's unit. So we're very fortunate that I don't have to fight for a lot of time. Usually he's given us all the time we need for special teams. So it's a really, really good opportunity.
Oh, no, I get that, Coach. And kind of going back to your attack phase drill real quick, when you run that drill, do you ideally want to have an actual long snapper there to simulate a snap, so your long snappers can get more reps? Are you using stick ball, coach just moving a ball? What is your preference there for that drill?
As much as possible, I'm having the long snappers out there snapping. That's their craft. If they're not on another unit or they're not doing something else during that period, depending on what you have availability for that guy, he's out there snapping.
Yeah.
You're stealing reps of him snapping and the punter doing drops. The punter's back there too. He's working. He's giving us that block spot because he's working his footwork and just dropping the ball and working on his drops and not kicking it. We're not wasting his leg, but he's over and over and over and over and over again getting that mental rep essentially of what we want him to do, for that unit. So it's always something that you're stealing reps with those two guys. Anytime you're doing pump block return, anytime you're doing the drill work, same thing. The returners are back there. If they're not on pump, if they're, they're back there and it's a live rep with them. How else are they going to be able to see it when, you have a guy working his finish? Well, that returner needs to be there catching the football, one, to give us good aiming points, and two, for him to be able to play off blocks and see how these guys in front of him are reacting. That's the only way I think you're going to be successful, is getting as many reps. And that's how you steal, in my opinion, that's how I'm stealing time, is I'm having the snappers always snap. I'm having the punters work on some sort of what they're doing without them kicking the football. And I'm having the returners out there on every unit. Even when we're working punt, the returners are out there catching the ball.
Yeah.
And they're giving our gunners good aiming points. They're doing the things that they have to do. And if, they're just working on catching the football. A judge machine is great. Well, a lot of people don't have them. A coach out there throwing the ball up in the air is great, but it doesn't simulate a real kick.
Yeah.
What's the best way to simulate a kick is having them out there catching the ball off somebody's foot. It's the best opportunity for you to really see and get the reps, in my opinion. And that's how I like to steal. I think you're stealing reps essentially of getting that guy live reps.
Okay, no, that's great, Coach. Is there any as we've hit several coaching points through this. Is there any kind of major coaching points we missed as we started talking about the punt block return phase? I know we didn't hit too much on the returner. Is there anything there you want to hit on, or any other points that we missed?
This could go on for 3 hours if we really starting to get into the finer coaching points. I'm trying to stay really general, but I think the biggest thing is in that attack phase is teaching the mentality of taking all the ground it belongs to you as the return unit. We preach every day that the ground belongs to you. You win in the attack phase by taking all the ground that belongs to you. They don't know whether you're, a return guy or a block guy or a hold up guy or whatever technique we want to use. The opposing team doesn't know in your first 3 steps. You win in those first 3 steps. You win if you're going to block it in those first 3 steps. You win on the return phase in those first 3 steps. So, the crucial point for coaching point for me in that attack is you're taking all the ground that belongs to you. Right? In the engage phase, it's knowing where you are in relation to the guy that you're going to block. You're working on all the drills, all the work on being in phase. You want to be in phase. You want to be in phase. You want to be in phase with that guy. Well, okay, I have to teach him what to do. Number 1, when he's in phase, and then number 2, if you're not in phase. This is the biggest thing where you avoid blocking the backs. If you're not in phase with that guy, turn around and look for somebody else coming at your face. Turn around, go back towards the line of scrimmage. Don't chase that guy. What are you going to do by chasing him? What's the only thing that's going to happen, Coach? He's going to get a block in the back, and then it's going to wipe out whatever play. So teaching that guy when you're not in phase to put your foot in the ground and run back. And at first, the kids are not going to, they're not going to like it, because it's something different from them. They're like, oh, I got to get back to the hip. I got to get back to the hip. Well, no, it's my job as a coach to teach you, hey, you're out of phase here. You're never going to get back to that hip. If you are, you're going to get a clip, and we're going to lose 15 yards on this, and that's not what we want. So turn around, put your foot in the ground, get back towards the line of scrimmage, and look for somebody else coming down that you can help clean up on. And then you avoid that nasty blindside block because you're coming back towards the line of scrimmage. And then obviously in that finish phase is you're coaching the finish of the return, of catching the football, where you finish on that block. But like I said, it's just trying to keep it really general so we're not going for a while. But I think if you, like I said, my philosophy is you need to win those 2 phases, the attack phase and the engage phase. And if you do that, then you can be really successful on this unit. If you don't do that, if you lose at those 2 phases, I think it's going to be really hard to be successful. So that's where all the drill work needs to come in. That's where the heavy emphasis, but that's why I like breaking it down into the big 3, those 3 phases, because then you can specifically tell the guys, hey, we're doing this drill for the attack phase. We're doing this instead of just going out there and, okay, yeah, we all as coaches try to have creative names for our drills because it helps the kids remember what the drill is and you don't have to explain it every time. But now I have you locked in. We go out there, I say, all right, this is right on the practice schedule. It says attack and the name of the drill. We're working the attack phase. Okay, it's engage and the name of the drill. You know what you're working. Your mind is already working on that, and you're breaking. It's just, I take that from my teaching days, and that was something that helped me be successful in the classroom, and it's something that I think is helping me so far being successful, on the football field of, really getting the guys' minds locked into, hey, this is the task at hand. This is where it fits in the big picture, that whole learning experience that, is drilled into your head as an educator, and now in bringing that to the football field.
Well, that's great, Coach. And thank you for that. the last thing I have for you, and it's kind of I kind of sent this ahead of you or ahead of time. Again, I don't need anything drawn up. But philosophically, and I'll go one out first. Philosophically, how do you think is the best way to attack like a shield punt? I mean, obviously, it's going to base a little bit off of their blocking scheme to an extent, and I know I'm trying to be overly general right now. But like when I've listened to a lot of people talk punt block or even punt, especially when it reverts to the shield, the biggest worry from my understanding, and I could be completely wrong here, and this is where I could be ignorant, is that backside A gap. Is usually like that's where I hear a lot of their problems come from. It's to like that one of the three shield sides. Because obviously there's usually like a 2 and a 1 side, and they merge together. It's usually that gap in between the 1 and 2 shield, or just off the hip of that one, off that far left shield. Typically, from what my understanding is, the problem. Is it, from your experience, is that necessarily the best places to attack it, or is there another way in your opinion?
I think that's the biggest worry because that's the quickest spot. That's the quickest line from where you align to the block spot. I think if you're looking at it from my standpoint, you're looking at from the pump block return standpoint, you have to, number one, look at operation time. What is their operation time? Is it a lousy operation time? Is it a fast operation time? And that determines, okay, are we going pump block return or just pump block on this? And that determines how many blocks you're going to have available and so on and so forth. And then after you look at the operation time, my biggest thing is I'm going to look at personnel. Where are they? Where is their best personnel on this unit? Right? Where do they have potential to use this as an attack? Where is the potential for a fake? What personnel is deficient on this unit? And make my determinations from there. But I think you hear a lot about the A gap and the backside A, like you're saying, because that's the quickest spot to the ball. You know what I mean? As everything's moving, that's the quickest point. But that goes back to, hey, for me, we're in the 2-point stances. A, like we said, because it makes those guys comfortable. But B, now I'm messing with their count system. Where if they're counting in that shield system, okay, well, who's going to come? Who's not going to come? If I have 10 guys on that line of scrimmage, they're all right there, right? Who's part of the count now? Who's not part of the count? Who's in? Who's out? You're manipulating that count system. So, like I said, I think that's talked about often because it is that quickest line to the block spot. But I think there's multiple ways to block a kick. My biggest thing is I want to, number one, I'm looking at I'm looking at operation time. Number two, I'm gonna evaluate their personnel, and then make the determination. What are we going to be most successful this week? Do they have that good operation time? Okay, well, you check that box. Yes, they have a good operation time. We don't think we can get there, so why even go after? Send an all-out block. Determine their scheme. Their operation time has to determine where you spend your time, I think. But you also have that mentality of, hey, this is what we do, and we're going to be really good at it. And even if you have a really good operation time, you have your block, and you think and you're going to get there based on what you do. So I had multiple ways to skin a cat. I think I answered your question. I hope I answered your question, but I really do think that it all has to start off with that operation time.
Okay. Then I'm going to kind of move to pro punt because I see it like once a year, but I've never heard anybody talking about attacking it. And I know you're going to kind of give me the same answer, operation time. But if operation time is beneficial to where you think you can block it, what does your gut tell you when you hear pro punt and how to attack it?
To be honest with you, I think you have to attack the edge of the pro. The guards and the the tackle and the wing essentially in that pro style punt. That's just where my gut's always been. I've always, I'll look there and see, is there somewhere where I can get there? It surprises me at the NFL. You don't see more blocks at the NFL level. Just it's been always my observation is, I know their op times are really great, and that's why that kind of factors into, what we want to focus on and my philosophy on it. But it always surprises me because you'll see some crazy stuff with the blocking scheme as far as, one guy's on this level, another guy's on that level. And I think the quickest way to block a kick versus a pro style is putting those guys on different levels.
Yeah, and like I'm just that's the one part of the NFL that hasn't
and wings on a different level. You have a really good shot of blocking it.
Yeah, I just that's the part of the NFL that really to me has not changed. Like I mean, I understand the blocking schemes changed a little bit, but like there's been like whereas college, I can turn on a different college game every hour and they have a different punt scheme. Whereas the NFL, virtually all of them just still use some form of the pro style punt, and it has not adapted at all. And I get a lot of it has to do with if you have a good snapper and punter, your operation time is going to be so good you don't have to do anything. It's just the lack of creativity is a bad word, but the lack of change there just annoys me. I don't know. I don't. Like, it goes back to our statement at the beginning. Like, just doing something because it's always been done that way is, just annoying. Like, it's not a good way to do things. So, well, I think that's a good place to end it. I think that was a good conversation on punt block return. Coach, I appreciate it. Again, if you want to get hold of Coach, his contact information will be in the bio. His video where he includes his drills and how he attacks with his punt block return will be in the bio as well. And again, I appreciate it, Coach. Is there any kind of closing thoughts before we go that you want to kind of hit on or say?
Yeah, I mean, number one, I want to thank you again. I think this is, like we said before, I think this is really great. You're getting people involved. The game of football, everybody steals something from everybody else, and if somebody can listen to me talk on here and get in touch with me and get one thing from me, then I think this is successful. Being a young coach myself still lots to learn. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't pretend to be a genius. I'm constantly learning from other people. I'm constantly watching the videos that you put up and listen to other coaches talk. So I hope I can give somebody one little tidbit or something to learn from, and even the opportunity. Don't feel free to reach out if you're listening to this or checking this out. Coach is going to put my contact information in the bio. Please feel free to reach out. Like I said, I'm always down for a conversation about football, and if I can learn something from you and you can learn something from me, then we got something out of it. So really looking forward to it. But thank you again for putting this together. And I just think this is so important in today's day and age. So we have, with all this COVID, everything's been forced to kind of have these Zoom meetings and go online, and to be able to have these opportunities to just sit around and talk about football and the game that we love, and how different people teach it and what they do. I think that's really important. So really appreciate what you do, and just think it's, we are a part of the greatest team sport in the world. I firmly believe that. It's, different backgrounds, different socioeconomic status, guys on your team, just the wide range of people you deal with, how it teaches you to deal with adversity. I really do believe this is the greatest team sport in the world. So, hopefully, here at John Carroll and the OAC, we're back at it in the spring. But until then, always willing to talk football. So feel free to reach out. And Coach, thanks again.
No problem, Coach. I thank you again. Real quick preview for the next 2 weeks. Coach Sam Linson will be on next week to talk punting and punt technique. And then the following week, we will have Coach Joel Dirge back. He's going to talk kind of being a high school head coach and implementing special teams and kind of some off-season drills. So that was another episode of the Kick and Cover podcast. Thank you, and see you next time.